Hello everyone. How are you doing? Now you all must be wondering why ma'am is asking this question when she knows that your answers won't be able to reach me. So I know what I'm asking you. I'd repeat my question. How are you doing today? So go ahead and answer that question to yourself for me, right? So, as most of you would be knowing, my name is Sonam and I'm here to teach you English. Some of you must have gone through my introduction video in which I told you about the concept that I would be following towards the teaching of English. So, for those of you who don't know yet, I would like to repeat myself over here. So, I will be covering your entire CBSC 11th class English. I would be, yes, covering your literature section, your reading section, and your writing section. And I have spoken with lots of students, interacted with lots of students, and likewise, after doing a lot of research and lots of follow up, the kind of strategy which I have designed for you students is that you just have to listen to my videos, you just have to watch my videos, and you don't even need to go and read the readers or the books. If you just follow my videos, just by watching the lectures on the videos, you are pretty much sorted with all the necessary sections of English, right? So you don't need to go and invest more time apart from these classes. So I'll be starting with at least 2 to 3 videos in a week and would gradually increase the frequency also, and everything would be covered through these videos, right? So today's agenda, we'll be starting with your core reader, the first reader of 11 CBSE English. The name of the reader is of course Hornbill, you all must be knowing, and the first chapter is The Portrait of a Lady. So today we'll be starting with the first chapter, Portrait of a Lady. I'll be finishing it in 2 parts. So today I'll be doing the first part with you. So it's a very famous short story written by a very famous Indian writer, and his name is Kushwansing. I believe there must be many Kushwansing fans over here. Even I have read many of his novels and his books. So he's, of course, late Mr. Kushwansing. He's no more with us. And one of the most popular Indian writers, Kushwansing, was a famous novelist, was a famous author, short story writer, he was a columnist, he was a journalist, he was a politician. Now, very celebrated writer, right? And why Kushwansing was famous, we, of course, this is not in your syllabi, but if we are reading somebody's work and such a famous story, if we are reading, so we must have a little bit of background of the author or the writer. So it's a short story. And why basically, in few words, Kushwansing as a writer was famous, I would like to tell you his USP that you say, or his, USP, I hope you understand, his USP, or the main, the best thing of him as a writer, which I personally felt was the sarcasm or the mockery that he used to use as a device in his writings. He had these short one-liners in which he used to put up a sarcasm or a satire or somebody, and those things become really interesting to read if you like to read such stories and writings. So yeah, and one more thing I would like to mention about Kushwant Singh is he was a very uninhibited writer. He just, without thinking much about how it would be interpreted by his readers, he used to just write his heart out. And yes, a very wise and intelligent man. So, The Portrait of a Lady, this pretty much is a real story which he's written about his own grandmother, right? So, all of us must be, many of us would be fortunate enough to be having grandparents, especially grandmother. So this, you will understand that all the grandchildren, they share a very sweet and a very nice loving bond with their grandmothers. Your grandmothers pamper you a lot, take a lot of care of you, right? So likewise, Kushwant Singh really liked his grandmother, of course, and this story, Portrait of a Lady, the lady that he talks about over here, in this story, in this rather short story, is his real grandmother, right? His grandmother. So portrait of a lady basically is he's thinking about his times, the good times and the average times, and the graphs he had with his grandmother, the relationship graphs that he had with his grandmother. So I've just put up a picture of the lady for you. So she was old, so we've just put up a picture for you to see. So let's, without wasting time, let's get started. So introduction of the story, this is nowhere found in the NCERT reader. Yes, sorry, I forgot to mention it. I would be giving you each and every line and each and every word of the NCERT. So my promise to you is that everything would be covered in our learnings, in our chapters, in our videos. There's no question that you will get that you would not have done with me. So everything would be covered. I am not just going to the shortcut giving you summary, nothing like that. Of course, I'll be giving you summary for an added tool, like an added tool, but each and every line, each and every word, difficult word, easy word, paragraph, line of NCERT, I would be covering with you, such that attempting the test and understanding the text becomes easier for you, right? So Kushwansing's Portrait of a Lady is the story of the author and his relationship with his grandmother over the years. We've not begun with the story yet. I'm just giving you a kind of background or introduction that what will follow in the story. So it is basically the story of Kushwansing and the relationship he had with his grandmother over years. It's a story by a grandson, that is Mr. Kushwansing, late Kushwansing, about his grandmother. He pens down her daily activities and how she evolved as a character as time passed by. So just he's thinking about his grandmother, the beautiful relationship that she shared with her, and he's penning it down for you, right? So he pens down her daily activities and how she evolved as a character as time passed by. He explains her appearance. He explains, he's a typical author who explains the appearance of his grandmother so beautifully with his words. That's the beauty of good writing, that as a reader, you'll actually be able to understand what I'm trying to tell you in real when we subsequently read the chapter. So you actually frame an image of the grandmother just using his words. You can actually frame a complete picture in your mind of the grandmother, and that's the beauty of a good writer, right? So let's quickly get started. I'll be reading it. These are excerpts. These are actual lines of the NCERT, right? So, my grandmother, like everybody's grandmother, was an old woman. Now, see, just, at the advent of the chapter, the first line of the chapter, you will be able to understand what I said when I introduced late Kushwansing as a writer who loved sarcasm, who loved mockery. You understand what's mockery? Mockery means to make fun of somebody. Now, here making fun is not in a very negative tone, but nobody starts a chapter like this. I'll come again with the line, my grandmother, like everybody's grandmother, was an old woman. So he starts with, जैसे सबकी grandmothers होती हैं, like everybody's grandmother, my grandmother was also an old woman. She had been old and wrinkled for the 20 years that I had known her. So Kushwansing was about 20 at that point of time. And he's telling that from the 20 years that I had known her, I had always seen her old and wrinkled. So aged and wrinkled face, right? People said that she had once been young and pretty and had even had a husband. But that was hard to believe. Now, Kushwansing, for the last 20 odd years, I would like to say, he had seen his grandmother, same old, same wrinkled, right? So for him, it was very difficult to believe that at some point of time, the grandmother might have been pretty and young. So that's what he's saying. People said that she had once been young and pretty. And even people said that she had a husband, but that was hard to believe. He's telling, for me, it was hard to believe. For me, that is for Kushwansing, it was very hard, very difficult to comprehend, to imagine that at a given past point in his grandmother's time, she must have been young and pretty, and she even had a husband. So according to him, only young people have husbands. So his grandmother was always old and wrinkled, so it's very difficult to believe that she might have even had a husband at some point of time. But that was hard to believe. My grandfather's portrait hung above the mantelpiece in the drawing room. You understand what's a mantelpiece? I've given you a GIF of that. This is basically a fireplace, and you can see the top marbled or a stone shelf over there. So that basically structure, which might be made of wood or might be made of marble, granite, or any stone above or around the fireplace, that is basically called a mantelpiece. So what the setting was that his grandfather's portrait, his grandfather's picture, his grandfather's portrait hung above the mantelpiece somewhere over here. See guys, somewhere over here. Here. So the portrait was hanging over the mantelpiece in the drawing room, and in that portrait, in that picture, the grandfather, he wore a big turban. Of course, he was Sikh. Kushwansing belonged to a Sikh family. So his grandfather, he wore a big turban and loose fitting clothes. So in that picture, he's showing you the picture, basically describing the picture of the grandfather, that he was wearing a big turban and he was wearing loose fitting clothes. His long white beard covered the best part of his chest, and he looked at least 100 years old. So he's describing the picture. It's kind of picture in picture that is going on with you right now. So he's describing the picture which was hanging on the mantelpiece. So he's describing that picture, that portrait was of his grandfather, and he's saying that my grandfather, he was wearing a big turban and loose fitted clothes in that picture, and he had a long white beard which covered the best part of his chest. Actually, his beard was very long, so that is why he's saying that it covered the best part of his chest. That means it was very long. It was going, it was kind of reaching his chest, right? So he had long white beard and he looked at least 100 years old. So see, we are not sure that in the picture, if his grandfather was 100 years old or 90 years old or around 100. But what Kushwansing is trying to tell you over here is that the grandfather was too old in that picture. He did not look the sort of person who would have a wife or children. So just imagine his idea. He's just trying to say that it's not possible to imagine that such an old person could ever be having kids, He could only be having grandkids, grandchildren. He was so old. I hope you're getting my point. As for my grandmother being young and pretty, the thought was almost revolting. I hope you know the meaning of the word revolting. Revolting basically means something that is disgusting, that is loathsome. Loathsome means hateable, detestable, disgusting. For example, I would like to use the word revolting for you in a sentence to make you understand the meaning of the word better. So revolting, maybe the smell of the room was highly revolting, or you can say the revolting smell in the room really troubled me. So disgusting, right? So just I would like to repeat these lines for you once again. As for my grandmother being young and pretty, the thought was almost revolting. Again, these lines show that sarcasm in his words. He's telling that even the idea or the imagination of my grandmother being young and pretty, the thought was almost disgusting. So you would also, as a reader, find these lines a little awkward. Yes, they are a little awkward. One should not be talking like this about their grandparents. But this is, his tone. This is the way he puts up his words, Kushwansing. And he's very famous for such tones, right? So he is telling you with a lot of sarcasm over here that for my grandmother being young and pretty, the thought was almost revolting. Means as a kid, as her grandson, imagining the condition that there would have been some point in life where my grandmother would have been young and pretty, just the idea of that thought was disgusting for me, was loathsome for me, was detestable for me, was hateable for me. This is what Kushwansing tries to tell you. She often told us of the games she used to play as a child. So the thing is that the author couldn't imagine that his grandmother was once young and pretty. He just couldn't connect with this idea that she could ever be young and pretty. Pretty here means beautiful, not the inside beauty, but the apparent beauty, right? So, what he's trying to tell you over here is that he couldn't even imagine or connect with this idea or fathom this idea, like even come close to this idea or imagine this situation that my grandmother could ever be young and pretty in the physical sense, right? So she often told us of the games she used to play as a child. Now, this is something that grandparents, grandmothers especially do a lot. What they do is they start describing their own moments or their own past incidents to their grandchildren. So, very often, many a times, the grandmother used to tell Kushwansing and his cousins about the games that she used to play when she was a child, when she was young. That seemed quite absurd and undignified on her part. So just imagine the way he used to, Kushwansing and his cousins used to interpret it. It was very normal for a grandmother telling about things or games or activities she used to perform as a child. But he would never come on that tangent because he never wanted to even imagine her being young and pretty. That idea was revolting or disgusting for him. So he, whenever she used to tell or talk about the games she used to play when she was a child, whenever she used to discuss these incidents with Kushwansing or with his cousins, Kushwansing used to feel very awkward, very illogical and undignified. Undignified means disrespectful. He used to hate it to the place where he actually started finding it illogical and disrespectful. So whenever she used to tell about her past incidents or past moments, like whenever she was a child, like these were the games, we used to play, Kushwant, when I was young, when I was your age, or when I was a little kid, I used to play these games as a child. So whenever she used to tell these things to Kushwansing, he used to feel very awkward. Absurd and undignified over here means absurd and undignified over here would mean illogical and disrespectful, right? Otherwise, absurd means weird, but over here, the kind of idea or the feel that they're giving is illogical and disrespectful on her part. And we treated it like the fables of the prophets she used to tell us. What are fables? Fables are basically fictional stories or fictitious stories, stories that are not true, right? So, fictional stories, which short stories which come with a morale, and prophets are basically saints, right? So she also used to keep on narrating her grandchildren, including Kushwansing, and she used to tell his cousins also, and more so Kushwansing. The grandmother used to keep on telling him stories, tales or fables or fictional stories, short stories of saints. So whenever she used to tell these stories to Kushwansing, he obviously knew that they are just made up imaginary stories. There's nothing true about those stories. So just like he used to interpret these stories told by the grandmother, these stories, these fictional stories of the saints, similarly, the true stories that his grandmother used to tell him, that we used to play these games, those games when we were kids, when I was a small kid, he used to he used to put those stories also into same shoes. He also used to feel that these stories, these incidents that the grandmother is talking about, they are also imaginary stories, like the fables of the saints she used to tell us. Those are imaginary, but these stories about her own childhood that the grandmother used to tell them were not imaginary stories. They were her real life stories, real life games or sports or activities that she used to participate in. But Kushwansing used to think of them as made up or imaginary stories which actually did not happen. So, students, these lines are really important. As for my grandmother being young and pretty, the thought was almost revolting. I will be covering some important questions also of this chapter in a video, but these texts, these lines are very important. They can ask you actually that why was this thought revolting to Kushwansing. So I've pretty much, I think, explained it to you. And she often told us of the games she used to play as a child that seemed quite absurd and undignified on her part, and we treated it like the fables of the prophet she used to tell us. So these lines are very important, and I hope you have understood them, right? So we'll go ahead. She had always been, now, he's talking about the physical appearance of the grandmother. She had always been short and fat and slightly bent. So she was a little overweight and she was short, and she had a stoop, She had a stooped back. So she was slightly bent and she used to use a stick to walk. Her face was a crisscross of wrinkles running from everywhere to everywhere. So crisscross, you understand? Crisscross, crisscross. So you must have seen a face of elderly people. Of course, it's a very natural phenomena. It's gonna happen, cross your fingers, but it's gonna happen to everyone, right? So likewise, it was for the same case for the grandmother, but he's trying to elaborate on it, throw some light on it. So she was short, she was fat, she had a stoop back. Her face was a crisscross of wrinkles. That means there were lots of crisscross wrinkles running from everywhere to everywhere. Running from everywhere to everywhere means all over her face those wrinkles were there. They just didn't seem to cease. Cease means stop. So they were everywhere, from everywhere to everywhere means, in short and easy language, her face was totally covered with lots and lots of wrinkles, right? No, we were certain she had always been as we had known her. Old, so terribly old that she could not have grown older, and had stayed at the same age for 20 years. You know, actually, grandchildren, they grow up seeing their grandparents at a particular age. So it's very difficult for them to actually imagine another age of their grandparents, like imagining how they looked when they were young. So for them, like it's the same case for Kushwansing also over here, the grandparents always look old only. They can never imagine that their grandparents would have perhaps looked pretty at some point of time in their lives. So no, we were certain she had always been as we had known her. So he was totally certain that my grandmother, I am totally sure she has always been like this only, wrinkled and stooped and fat and short and bent, right? Old, so terribly old that she could not have grown older. So he's kind of trying to say that it's not possible to grow older than this, She's so old, so terribly old, and had stayed at the same age for 20 years. So these lines are again and again giving you an idea that, these talks are going on when he was about 20 years of age. So from a few months till the age of 20, he's trying to convey to all us readers is that he knows and relates to his grandmother to be the same. It's not practically possible, but that is how the grandchildren are, She could never have been pretty, but she was always beautiful. I'm underlining this line for you. Of course, the underlining would go, but yeah, these lines are also very important. You can, if you have your NCRT along with you, you can underline these lines. So she could never have been pretty, but she was always beautiful. Just, pretty, beautiful, they appear to be synonyms, but there is a difference over here in the way he's using these words. He's saying she could never have been pretty. Pretty means, over here, according to Kushwansing, pretty means good looking. Right? So he's trying to say that his grandmother, it's not possible that at any given point of time in her life, in maybe her past, it's not possible that ever the grandmother could have been pretty. So pretty means physically pretty. Beautiful face, beautiful smile, to somebody who looks charming, attractive, and beautiful, that feeling he's telling is not possible. It's not possible because since the past 20 years, I've seen her same old, crisscross, wrinkled, bent woman. So I can't imagine her to have ever been pretty. So that's what he's saying. She could never have been pretty. So this pretty means good looking, pretty, attractive. But she was always beautiful. Beautiful means inside beauty, the inside beauty of a person that comes from his love, from his care, from his affection, from his behavior, right? There must have been situations, you must have come across people in your life. I have come across such people in my life who initially do not attract you because they are not pretty, they are not good looking. But when you start living with them, when you start understanding them, when you start understanding their nature, when you start understanding them actually how they are, then you understand that no, physical beauty is not important. What is important is how that person is, the inside beauty, because physical beauty, as we all know, is perishable. At some point of life, it'll go. But that inside beauty is very important. So you understand the difference? He's saying she could never have been pretty. Kushwansing is telling, no, no, no. My grandmother could never have been pretty. See, these words are a little hurtful to me as a reader, of course, to you also. But you need to understand that this is his tone as an author, right? As a writer. So, she could never have been pretty. She was always old. She has always been old. I have seen her since the last 20 years. I have seen her. I have observed her for 20 years. She's always been fat, slightly bent. Her face is wrinkled. So how can she be pretty? No, no, no. She's not pretty, but she was beautiful. In the next lines, I will be able to elaborate on this better, that how beautiful. Of course, beautiful. She was a good lady. She used to take great care of Kushwansing, or for that matter, many, many people around her. But yes, I will be referring to the text, right? I hope this you've understood. So I'll go ahead. Now, Kushwansing is throwing some light on how his grandmother was beautiful. Now, see, these are also very, very important lines of the chapter. I've you would be noticing I've put in some pictures for you, just for you to develop an idea of how, how the appearance would have been. So on the top right, you can see the grandmother, and that's a wrinkled face. It's basically a wrinkled and a puckered face. Puckered word will come to your head maybe in this time, in this paragraph only. Puckered is when your face is so full with wrinkles. Don't laugh, okay? Something like this. This is a puckered face. When you grow old, so the skin sags. So that kind of look, this is the best puckered face I could find out for you of an old woman. I mean, best in the way. Please don't misunderstand me. Best in the way. Just the features or the face that best describes the wrinkled crisscross. So yeah. So I'll go ahead. She hobbled about the house in spotless white, with one hand resting on her waist to balance her stoop, and the other telling the beads of her rosary. Each and every line of this paragraph is very important. So, hobbled about the house. See, hobbling is not walking properly, walking in an awkward manner. Here, since the grandmother was old, so as I've already told you, she was slightly bent. She had a stoop, right? So she was not having proper balance. So she used to walk in a slightly awkward way with that slight bend. Okay. So she hobbled means walked in an awkward way about the house in spotless white. Spotless white, she used to wear clean, clear, spotless, clean white colored clothes. So that is why spotless white, with one hand resting on her waist to balance her stoop. You must have seen old women, right? So since she had this stoop, since she was bent, So just to give a kind of balance to her, she used to put this one hand on her waist. Of course फिजिक्स में भी इसके कुछ रीजनिंग्स होते होंगे कि कैसे अपने आप को इस तरीके से बैलेंस किया जाता है. At that I will not be able to explain you, but yes, that one hand on the waist, you would have seen in practical life also people with stoop kind of walk with a little bit of difficulty with this one hand resting on their waist, probably to balance themselves, because otherwise they are not able to walk properly, right? So with one hand resting on her waist to balance her stoop, and the other telling the beads of her rosary. This, this chapter was there when I was studying in school, and it's still there, this chapter. So I still remember our teacher really struggled explaining to us what is the meaning of counting the beads of rosary. And today it was really fun for me picking up a GIF for you, and you can see in such an interesting manner without even, I don't even have to tell you what counting the beads of the rosary mean. So this is counting the chanting, basically chanting the beads of the rosary. We keep on saying om, om, and whatever chants we keep on doing, and we keep on counting that Rudraksh mala, or that holy thread with beads. So that is basically a rosary, right? So with one hand she used to keep on reciting her prayers and counting the beads of the rosary, which you can see in that effect that I've placed for you. And on the other, with the other hand, she used to balance her waist. She used to keep it on her waist and balance her stoop, right? And this way, with one hand counting the rosary beads and the other hand trying to balance her stoop, she used to keep on walking in the house. Her silver locks were scattered untidily over her pale, puckered face. See, puckered comes, and her lips constantly moved in inaudible prayer. Okay, so she had silver locks. Locks, of course, are hair. Silver, of course, age, she was really, really old. So her silver locks, her silver hair was scattered untidily. Of course, when you grow old, lot of dryness comes in your hair. So not mine, I was generally trying to touch the hair. So her silver locks were scattered untidily all over her face. So they were not properly combed. They were a little rough, and they were just scattered in a very untidy manner all over her face, over her pale, puckered face. Very important. You need to, by the way, just by one reading only, you will be able to, these words, they'll just get into your head. Nothing tough over here. But yes, sometimes, in answers, if you use the exact NCRT language, it is good. You get good marks. And you also feel good about it, that yes, I was able to retain these vocab words. So don't worry. You don't have to open the reader again and learn them. I'll keep on gradually repeating them for you so that they just get inside your head. Right? So her silver locks were scattered untidily over her pale, puckered face. Pale is kind of the yellow tinge that is there. See, less ruddy, I would say. Ruddy means redness in the face when you're young and bright. And as you grow old, of course, that pale tone, that yellowish tinge starts coming. So basically, the use of the word pale over here is to give the idea to the readers that she was really, really old. So her silver locks were scattered untidily over her yellowish face. Puckered face, again, highly wrinkled face. I made that face for you. I'm not going to make it again. And her lips constantly moved in inaudible prayer. There was a lot physically going on, She was walking and one hand's chanting the mantras, and with her lips, she was constantly speaking out the prayers that was inaudible. Means inside she was just chanting her mantras and counting the beads of the rosary. So inaudible means something that you're not able to hear, but of course from the lip movement you can make out that this is what is happening. See, this is a very regular thing. We all have grown up in houses where we have grandparents, or we all have experienced our loving and caring grandparents. So I'm not sure if each and every characteristic trait that we are talking about over here would be present in your grandparents, but I'm dead sure that one or two of those characteristic traits would be there, right? My grandmother, she's no more. And if I'm not wrong, she crossed 100, yeah. And after that, she was not like, she's no more with us. So whenever I read this, her face kind of comes in front of me, that puckered face, that wrinkled face. So yes, lots of, and that prayer, that inaudible prayer, even she used to keep on chanting something or the other. I used to ask my grandmother, Dadi Ma, ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕੀ ਬੋਲਦੇ ਪਏ ਹੋ? She was a Punjabi, but like those were all prayers. As kids, we never understood. So I'm sure you would also be able to relate with what some things would be there in your grandparents also. So these are very regular things. It's just that the author, he would put a lot of flavor to the words. So that's just pretty much about it. Okay. So, yes, she was beautiful. So now he's repeating those lines. So these are the reasons why she was beautiful. Yes, she was beautiful. She was a beautiful lady. She was a gentle, kind-hearted, loving, caring lady. She was a beautiful lady. She was beautiful from inside. But no, she was not pretty. She was beautiful. Now you know the meaning of the two words that we're using here, right? She was like these lines are also very, very, very important. She was like the winter landscape in the mountains, an expanse of pure white serenity, breathing peace and contentment. Very, very important line. See, this is a simile. Simile is basically a poetic device, or a writer's device, a writer's tool, where the author compares two things that are not actually supposed to be compared. Author is comparing two different things using words like as or like, that becomes a simile. So here you pretty much just need to know that this is a simile. What is a simile? I'm telling you. She was like the winter landscape in the mountains. So the late Mr. Kushwansing, the author of this short story, is comparing his grandmother to winter landscape in the mountain. Now, grandmother is a different thing. Landscape, winter landscape in the mountains means a snow-covered mountain. That is totally a different thing. So both of them are totally different concepts. And he's trying to compare those two concepts using like. She's trying to compare the beauty of the winter landscape or the white snow-covered mountains to the beauty of his grandmother. So that is why this is a simile. So whenever a question comes about these lines, quickly you just need to just trust me over here and write it that this is a simile, the Kushwansing is using a very beautiful poetic device over here. He's comparing the beauty of the grandmother to the winter landscape in the mountains, and that's why it's a simile, right? He's comparing two different things with like, right? Okay, so now I'll be explaining these lines to you. An expanse of pure white serenity. Now, first I'll explain the lines to you which came before this. She was like the winter landscape in the mountains. Now, you must have seen winter landscape in the mountains means winter depiction of the mountains. How would they be? They would be totally snow-clad, right? Totally white, full of snow. So, have you ever stood even for 5 minutes? You must have in front of snow-covered mountains. What apparition do they give? They give you an apparition of a lot of peace, lot of whiteness, totally white, totally peaceful, totally serene, right? Totally covered with snow. So that is the meaning of she was like the winter landscape in the mountains. So winter landscape in the mountains basically means the snow covered mountains. An expanse of pure white serenity. Expanse of pure white serenity, totally white. The snow covered mountains are totally white. Very peaceful. So now what the author is doing here is he's trying to compare the beauty, the inside beauty of his grandmother, her purity, her serenity, her calmness, her relaxed and peaceful character, to the white and peaceful and snow-clad, snow-covered mountains. That is what he's trying to do, right? Breathing peace and contentment. Who is breathing peace and contentment? His grandmother. Means she is always peaceful. She is living a life of peace. And contentment means satisfaction and happiness, right? So I would quickly, in a jiffy means quickly, once again, since these make for very, very important lines of the chapter, so I would like to repeat them for you. His grandmother, his grandmother is very fair, right? She wears white clothes, she has silver locks, is very calm in nature, and she spreads peace and tranquility all around with her presence. She symbolizes the color white in every possible way. Thus, Kushwansing is comparing her to the winter landscape, the snow-covered landscape in the mountains. So, I will once again repeat the lines for you. She was like the winter landscape in the mountains, an expanse of pure white serenity, breathing peace and contentment. So over here, the author, since he already knows that the grandmother, she was very fair. She used to wear white clothes. She was physically, in a lot of white. She had white hair and she used to wear white clothes, and her nature was also very peaceful, very calm, very composed. So he is telling that just like a beautiful white serene winter landscape, his grandmother was also as pure as that, as pure as the snow clad landscape in the mountains. So he's comparing the peacefulness, the serenity, the beauty of the grandmother with the peacefulness and the tranquility of the snow-covered white mountains. And of course, you will also add the imagery, the imagery of, not the imagery, the imagery of the white features of the grandmother, like her white clothes, her white locks, right? The white clothes that she used to wear, and the inner beauty, the peacefulness, the tranquility. You will add these things and you will compare it with the whiteness or the peacefulness of the snow-covered mountains, right? These lines are very, very important. Most likely to get a question from here, right? We will also be covering them in questions, right? So I'll go ahead. My grandmother and I were good friends. My parents left me with her when they went to live in the city, and we were constantly together. Now, Kushwansing is talking about a past moment in his life when his parents, they went, it's a true story. Actually, I think his parents went to Delhi, if I'm not wrong. Yes, because he grew up, his schooling and all was there in Delhi. If I'm not wrong, see, I remember these from my school and college days because I've also done a lot of novels. I've done an honors in English. So we've read these novels a lot, and I've read a lot of his work. So I'm also from Delhi. So if I'm not wrong, he's from Modern School Delhi. It's a very famous school in Delhi. And he has done his graduation also from, I think, St. Stephen's. Correct me if I'm wrong. But yes, I think from St. Stephen's, and St. Stephen's is also very, very, very famous and good college in Delhi. So, and then of course he went outside for further studies. So, the scene was that his parents, they actually left Kushwansing with his grandmother to live in the village while they were setting out for the entire family in a town. They went to a city and they just had this plan in their mind that we'll start working, we'll create a kind of stability, and then we'll call the grandmother and Kushwansing, right? So so he's talking about that time when his grandparents left Kushwansing with his grandmother. So she was his only caretaker then, right? So my grandmother and I were good friends. Kushwansing is telling we were very good friends. My parents left me with her when they went to live in the city, and we were constantly together. So you are understanding, the parents left Kushwansing with his grandmother, and they were very good friends, and they were constantly together. The parents went to live in the city, and they were in the village. Kushwant and his grandmother were in the village. So she used to wake me up in the morning and get me ready for school. So grandmother was also, a very, a very good lady. She used to take a lot of care of the child. So she used to take care of all his routine activities, his food, his packing up his stuff for school, walking him to the school. Yeah, so she used to wake me up in the morning and get me ready for school. So every day the grandmother used to wake Kushwansing up in the morning and get him ready for school. She said her morning prayers in a monotonous sing song while she bathed and dressed me, in the hope that I would listen and get to know it by heart. Now, that is how parents do. My parents also used to do the same thing. So, when they want their kids to learn something, telling them again and again that this is, Om Bhur Bhava Swaha and you have to learn it, or this is the Aarti and you need to learn it. If they keep on telling like that, no, the kids would never learn. So what they do is they keep on chanting those mantras, or chanting the the Aarti or all these things, the Gayatri mantra or all these things in front of their kids again and again, such that by hearing their parents, the children also get to memorize it. The sole objective is that the kids also should learn it. So that is how the grandmother used to behave. She said her morning prayers while she was bathing and dressing Kushwansing every morning. She used to say the morning prayer in a monotonous sing song. Why monotonous? Monotonous is basically dull, boring. Why dull, boring? Because it becomes repetitive. So of course she used to do it every morning, same prayer every morning, same prayer every morning, and she used to sing it in a very song or a tuned in kind of a manner, so that Kushwansing could learn it or remember it. But he used to find it very boring, he used to find it very monotonous, right? So in a hope that I would listen and get to know it by heart, I listened because I loved her voice but never bothered to learn it. So he listened it, he loved his grandmother's voice, but his intention was never to learn it, right? So these lines also, they're not very important, but yes, they tell you how his relationship with his grandmother was there during the village days, right? Then she would, after getting him ready, after bathing him, getting him dressed up, chanting prayers in front of him, then next step, what she used to do every morning while preparing the kid for the school, Kushwansing, the grandson, for the school, then she would fetch my wooden slate, which she had already washed and plastered with yellow chalk, a tiny earthen ink pot, and a red pen, tie them all in a bundle and hand it to me. So she was, are you noticing that the grandmother was really well organized? The grandmother was, yeah. So the grandmother was very well organized. She would fetch the wooden slate which she had already washed. She was already well prepared. She had timed out everything, that okay, now the time has come that I need to take my grandson to the school. I need to make food for him. I need to make him ready for the school. I need to get him ready. So she would fetch. To fetch something means to get it. So she would go fetch his wooden slate, Kushwansing's wooden slate, which she had already washed. She had already washed it and plastered with yellow chalk. Why plastering it? See, after washing, she used to plaster the slate with clay, making it easier for Kushwansing to write on it, right? So that's why the plastering used to be there, such that it, out of gradual use, the slate used to get ruptured or it used to get worn out. So she used to plaster it such that he could give his best handwriting on it while he goes to the school. So you would notice a very organized behavior. She used to take proper care of her grandson. These things show that she really loved Kushwansing a lot, right? So she would fetch his wooden slate, which she had already washed and plastered with yellow chalk. Then a tiny earthen ink pot. Earthen means made out of mud, maybe. Yeah, the earthen, matka, mitti ka jisko hum bolte hain. So tiny earthen, made out of clay. Tiny earthen ink pot, red pen. So all these things were required, the kind of stationery that was required for his village school. She used to tie them all in a bundle and hand it over, like your mothers do with your bag. That is how she used to do. It was a village, so the articles become different. So kind of the feeling goes the same over here also, right? Tie them all in a bundle and hand it to Kushwansing. After a breakfast of thick stale chapati with a little butter and sugar spread on it, we went to school. Sometimes whenever, I used to do teaching, like physical teaching, when students used to be in front of me, I'm just trying to give you a question with students usually are, ma'am, why stale chapati? Couldn't she make fresh ones? So I'm not saying rotten. It's just stale. That means probably, she used to cook it overnight so that it saves some time the next morning. So that is why stale, not rotten. She is not feeding rotten food to the kid. It's just maybe last night's food or something like that. Okay. Yeah. So after the breakfast that's the breakfast that they used to do every day. Some stale chapati with little butter and sugar spread on it. After having the breakfast, they went to school. They went to school together. They went to school. She carried several stale chapatis with her for the village dogs. So she even used to carry chapatis for the village dogs. So from these lines, what kind of a figure you feel is the grandmother? So yes, we have noticed her organized behavior. She took very, very good care of Kushwansing, right? She was very well organized. You can use these words over here, that she used to pack up for she used to pack all the necessary articles, the stationery for him, like the slate or the tiny earthen ink pot, red pen. She used to tie everything in a bundle, organize all the things for him and hand it to him. Then she used to serve him breakfast. And of course, after that, one more thing, that she used to make things easier for Kushwansing. And after that, one more, she used to take care of she was very organized. She used to take care of all the necessary things that used to be done in the morning so that he reaches school in time. She used to, of course, go with him to the school, walk him to the school, go with him to the school. And one more thing, if you notice, she was an animal lover, right? She used to carry the food she used to carry the stale chapatis for the dogs. So she was also an animal lover. So you don't need to learn these. I'm just mentioning them, right? Okay. My mother always went to school with me because the school was attached to the temple. Now, just, kind of try to understand the setup. So, the school was attached to a temple. So, she used to go along with the grandmother, and Kushwansing used to go to the school together. Kushwansing used to attend the school and grandmother used to go to the temple, right? So, school was attached to the temple. The priest, now here in the village, the priest used to teach them. The priest used to teach the kids. The priest taught us the alphabet and morning prayer. So this was the routine. Alphabets, you understand, and morning prayer. So religious stuff was also taught in school to the kids, right? So to Kushwansing, the priest, and of course the other students also in the school, the priest taught them the alphabet and the morning prayer. While the children sat in rows on either side of the veranda. Veranda, you understand? Veranda is a courtyard, an open kind of a setting. You must have seen in movies, open kind of schools, village schools. So the children sat in rows on either side of the veranda. Either means this side and this side, right? So they could sit on any of the sides. So while the children sat in the rows on either side of the veranda, singing the alphabet or the prayer in a chorus. They used to sing the prayers and the alphabet in unison. Unison, this is a kind of practice that small kids do, singing everything together in chorus together so that they learn. It's a learning technique for small kids, more so in villages, right? So while the children sat in rows on either side of the veranda singing the alphabet or the prayer in chorus, my grandmother sat inside reading the scripture. So grandmother used to sit inside the temple, and she used to read the scriptures, the religious sacred writings she used to read. So both of them performed their individual activity at that point of time. While on one hand, Kushwansing used to attend the school, the priest used to teach him the alphabet and the morning prayer. They used to sit on either side of the veranda, you can say veranda or the courtyard, and they used to repeat the alphabet or the prayer in chorus. On the other hand, the grandmother, she sat inside the temple reading sacred religious writings. When we had both finished, we would walk back together. So after finishing the Kushwansing, after finishing the school, and the grandmother after finishing her reading of the scriptures, both of them, when they finished, they would walk back together. This time the village dogs would meet us at the temple door. So it was a regular affair. So of course, if regularly they, this was their timing, so the dogs also did their timing. The dogs also used to understand the timing, so they used to know that, okay, now it's time for the school to get over, and Kushwansing and his mother would come at the temple gate, and so the dogs used to expect food for them, because every day they used to serve stale chapatis to the dogs on the way back to home from the temple door. So this time the village dogs would meet us at the temple door. They followed us to our home, growling and fighting with each other for the chapatis we threw to them. So the dogs, you know how they are, growling and fighting. Growling is that low sound that comes from a throat. You know, the dogs keep on making that kind of sound, not necessarily barking. It can be when they're happy, it can be when they're angry, right? So here at this moment, they used to make that sound of growling and fighting with each other for the chapatis Kushwansing and his grandmother used to throw to them, right? So this pretty much ends the first part of this chapter. I have divided the portrait of a lady into two parts for you. See, I could have easily done the summary in 15-20 minutes, but then, you know, if answers come from in between the text, which definitely come because teachers are wise, right? So, and they want you to do the text properly, right? And we should also be reading the text properly. So I understand the fact that you people don't have that much time. So that is why I'm doing the reading work for you. And I'm giving you lots of examples. That's my way of teaching. I usually give lots and lots of examples. I usually put you in practical situations using my past experiences such that you can relate to the things better. So I've pretty much divided this chapter into two portions. More than half is over in part 1. I'll be making another video which would be around half an hour video, in which I will be completing the chapter, and then one more video I'll be making on the same chapter. It will also be a small video, one video for important questions, right? And another 5 to 7 minute video I will be making. It's a plan which I have done of important words. You just have to see, you don't have to follow a dedicated time schedule for this. I am doing this work for you. I will be dedicating myself and making the videos for you. You just, at any point of time on that particular day on which I shared the video, please take out some time and watch the video, and you are pretty much sorted. And this is not something like difficult subjects where there are lots of calculations or mental calculations or brain work is involved. You just need to sit, relax on a chair or maybe on a sofa or a couch, wherever you feel comfortable, and listen to me explain the lesson to you. This is all you need to do. So please don't think that this is a teaching session with a lot of brain activity going on for you. No, just take it as a story. I'm doing the hard work for you, and I'm assuring you that everything will come from what I'm teaching you, right? So this is the least I think you people can do, right? So you have to do this, you should do this, you must do this, and we'll quickly finish this chapter in the next video. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed studying with me, and if you like this, please share it with your friends and all. Maybe it's not necessary that they are in science stream. Of course, science stream students would be able to take a lot of advantage of this because they don't get time. I know they don't have time. But commerce or any other student who has to write +1 11th standard CBSE English paper, you can share the video with them. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day.